how involved is the owner in driving revenue and running the company? In other words, how much of the business is really associated with the owner themselves? And obviously, when businesses get really big, less of that's true. But I think on the lower end of the middle market, you still see a lot of business owners that are so tied into the business that it's very hard to hand off. So from a buyer's perspective, that's a very difficult thing. So, I encourage owners to look at that aspect of their business and say, how can we make this more of a business that is more transparent, that really doesn't need me coming in to drive revenue or drive the management of the business? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. We call that business dependence, and we flip it both
Yeah.
ways. How dependent is the business on the owner, and how dependent is the owner on the business? There's a whole identity thing that hits when people
Yes.
do have to sell their business. But I have to relate a kind of an interesting story somebody told me. They said when they talk to a small business owner, they ask them, well, if the computer or the network goes down, can you fix it? And if they answer yes, that's actually a bad thing because they're too involved in the business and the business is too dependent on them. So I thought that was an interesting sort of question to ask a business owner.
That's a great question. And it's very true. It's funny because, my background, I fell in love with technology in school, got a degree in computer science, and I've been, sort of in love with technology for a long time. And it's really taken me a long time to back away from that very thing. In other words, when the network breaks, I can remember, sort of the painful decision, do I find an IT person to handle this, or do I keep gluing together our network? And, sometime, actually, when we bought it back from Wiley, it became really clear, that was not something that was a good use of my time, and we have an IT person that I now just offload all that stuff to. So if you ask me that question, could I fix the network, the answer today is no.
And that's a good thing. Yeah, I fight the geek impulse as well. You may not know this, but I started my career as a manufacturing systems engineer with IBM. So my first inclination is always, let's get it. Oh, wouldn't it be fun to solve this problem? Well, I don't, as a business owner, I got to not do that.
Yeah, but when you talk about, I think it's interesting. I think, some of the traditional management sort of philosophy and management strategy really comes into play here. In other words, what is a CEO spending your time on? I think, if you look at that through a valuation perspective, there can be some tremendous motivation. I mean, let's get really specific here. If you do, a time analysis chart as a CEO of what you're spending time on, how much of your time is really, that important but not urgent stuff that everybody talks about. And my guess is for most CEOs, it's less than 10% because what are we doing? We're fighting urgent stuff. We're fighting, day-to-day fires. We're keeping the business running. And I understand